Yo, 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 and welcome back to another episode of the Nyc Griff Show. Today is Saturday, April 30th. It is 8:59 a.m., just turned 9 o'clock a.m. Griff, how was your week, man?
Pretty killer, brother. California weather is pretty insanely nice. That's what I would take away from this week. Anytime there's a bad day, it's really not that bad. If you've grown up in the Midwest, or for that matter of fact, played football in college in the Northeast. You know what?
Yikes.
A Wednesday in California is not the same for everybody. Okay, it's not the same. How was your week?
It was really good. Got some really good stuff going in the business, and it's kind of fun being a part of the Bitcoin community, but then also seeing, in my everyday life, being in the commercial real estate world and commercial construction, with working with developers and lenders and all that kind of stuff. It's fun to see that side of the world churning and moving and shaking, right? And then we hop on here on a Saturday morning and we get to talk about what's coming in the future. And so it's kind of fun to see both of these things playing out in real time. And then getting to hop on here on a Saturday morning and chop it up and hang out, talk about what we're seeing.
Yeah, it was a pretty wild week in the financial world, as well as like the public sector. But I guess we'll overview that in our little market check.
We will. Let's hop into the old market check here. What were some of the things that you were seeing here this week?
As you know, I loosely keep up with a lot of the traditional markets. I just saw that they were down. I saw Amazon took a 15% dump because everybody calls it a dump in Bitcoin. It's a dump in Amazon. What a shitcoin that is. And secondly, I saw that the NASDAQ is down like 21 or 22% this year, and Bitcoin is only down 17.
Yeah, so let's look just year to date. Yeah, look at that.
Does that count as decoupling? Because obviously it hasn't decoupled yet, but it is going down less, which in a recession is kind of impressive if you think about it. Bitcoin's pretty resilient.
Look at that. I mean, that right there is your COVID or pre-COVID top, and then it drops way off, and then we're cruising, right? It's kind of interesting looking at some of these types of things, or looking at like the S&P, the Dow Jones, the NASDAQ. It seems interesting that we fall off right during COVID, and then they print all this money. It seems to make sense that if they print a bunch of money and it all flows to equities, that the true impacts of inflation, as far as how they impact the markets, might be lagged behind, right? Because if everybody took all that stimulus money, all that extra printed money, and it went all here, right, and created this artificial boom, well, then whenever people realize that it's all just made up and fake and not exactly the truth, and they start selling off, well, then that's when you start to see all the money flood into the markets, right? Or could be, right? I don't know. I'm just speculating there. What are your thoughts on that? Does that make sense? I don't know if the logic makes sense there.
It seemed like, so you're saying like just the way money is flowing, there's a delay from what market first to?
Yeah. So imagine like, so they print all this money, and all the money that's printed that gets thrown out into the market. Let's say that people throw it all into the markets, and let's just say, for super simple example, they throw it all into the S&P 500, and then because all this excess liquidity is thrown into the S&P, that it jumps in price, right? Therefore, it would create this artificial boom in the stock market, but that all that printed money did not go out into the markets and increase the price of products as drastically as it could have, right? But then people start to realize, oh, this market is artificial, right? This price isn't real. It's because of the printing of the money that got thrown into the market. People sell off, and then their sell off, and now that excess liquidity is in the hands of the people who sold all the stock, and then it starts entering the market a little slower. I mean, we're seeing inflation at 8.5% in March. I mean, is that a lagging effect, or is that showing real-time effects? Obviously, like, we could talk about how the metric is done, but like,
we know what it's actually showing. I mean, like, we also know that they changed that metric to their liking. It's like you take relative inflation is hard to really gauge. That's why a lot of economic theories suck, because you're really like, who are you to tell somebody that the economy is good? It really is all relative depending on who you are. The economy is not good right now. Not if you don't own assets, not if you haven't been able to play the game for a little while. It's really hard to absorb these inflationary like bubbles. It's also really hard to absorb the prices as a regular day consumer. It's tough right now.
Griff,
And I don't know
look
what
at
you're thinking
this.
on.
What does this mean here? Looking at this dollar index,
I have no idea.
what does this mean, dude? I saw a deal that that Dylan LeClaire was talking about. Basically, we're coming to this point where everything is converging, and it's about to just go kaboom, right? But it's super weird looking at this. I mean, with the markets falling off, and then the currency, the dollar, coming up in value. I don't even, what does this even mean, dude? There's so many pieces. Maybe we know somebody else that can help us out with this. Hey, we got Joe Consorti coming back on. I don't know if you saw that on Twitter last night, but got him scheduled. He's going to come back on, and he's big on this type of stuff. He likes tracking the macro trends, the charts, all that kind of stuff. So we'll have to see if he's got any thoughts on this. I'm sure he does. But hey, for you guys that are listening here, the S&P over this past week, it is down $155. It's sitting at 41.31, and Bitcoin is, let's see, on the week down $755, and it is sitting at $38,400. Let's look at the NASDAQ here.
Well, it's good that one Bitcoin is still one Bitcoin. You know what I'm saying?
That's really the main thing, right?
I mean, it really is the main thing. There's been a lot that's going on in Bitcoin, obviously, but the market, I'm pretty sure within the last week, the hash rate is now at a new all-time high.
Yep, I've seen that.
More secure than ever. It's still the greatest incentives program ever. I will say, because I like doing this now, I need to start saving my favorite tweet of the week so that I could read it on here.
That'd be a good little piece there, yeah.
Yeah, my favorite tweet of this week, though, was somebody who was like, blockchain had been around. Bitcoin's innovation is not really blockchain. So everybody that's so obsessed with blockchain, like that's not what we really got right with Bitcoin. What Bitcoin got right was proof of work and an incentives program that makes it so that it is more advantageous for you to join the network than it is for you to attack it. That's what, those are two things that Bitcoin did better than any other hash cash or whatever they had back in the day. That's what made it better. And so I think people just don't understand. People continue to not understand one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin standard is coming whether you like it or not. Bitcoin does not care. And I don't know. That's just what I would like to kick it off.
Hey, another piece. I had a super interesting conversation, and I'm excited. We've got this guy booked to come on the show as well. Big geopolitical guy, talking about the mass adoption of Bitcoin as a legal tender, as a currency, as a store of value, all of these different pieces. We were talking about the Central African Republic that just announced that they are going to be adopting Bitcoin as their legal tender, right? So that's the second country. So we've got El Salvador, and now we've got the Central African Republic. But we were talking about mass adoption and the order that has to go in. I sent you a string of text messages.
I want you to dive into this with me.
We're gonna have to now. We'll dive into it with the guy whenever he comes on the show, because he really took me through his thought process, and it really kind of shocked me. It was, I'd kind of thought about what he was talking about before, but not to the depth that he brought it. And so that was really interesting. So I'm excited to have him on here in a couple of weeks, and we'll get to dive into that. But before we get to more guests, I'm excited to have another guest on today, another local Tulsa Bitcoiner, been in the space for a long time, well-established guy. Got to meet him, let's see, at my first Tulsa Bitcoin meetup in person, I guess, met him for the first time there. Talked a little bit on Twitter. Got to be a guest on his radio show and podcast last week. I think it was last week. And we are excited to have him here. He is the host of the Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore show. And today we have got on none other than Matthew J. Moore himself. Welcome onto the show, Matt. How are you?
Hey, doing good, guys. Happy to join you.
Absolutely. How has your week been? We normally like to start this thing off and you know, what was your week like? What's happening in your world and what's
Yeah, man. Just in talks with a couple of potentially new sponsors for the radio show. I've been hammering out some new guests, and that's kind of been my main focus. So, and the spring is here, so I'm actually celebrating spring. So I'm actually looking forward to that.
Yeah, I don't know, Griff, if you can see those sunglasses too well, but I got to see him in person the other day, and these suckers are no joke.
Yeah, those things are like a whole like face shield in football. Like
That's right.
Things cover a lot of surface area right there.
Yeah.
I have not. Well, we met right before the show here, but how did you start a radio show for Bitcoin? Where'd you get that idea? Why'd you start it? Where are you guys at now? Has it grown a ton? Like, how's it been doing?
So we've been doing it for a year. We've had, wonderful guests like Mark Yusko and Greg Foss and some really big names in the Bitcoin space. And recently we just had Brian Harrington from Choice App, which I think maybe you guys have coming down the road. But it's been a blast because, a year ago I had a friend of mine, his name was Eric Cooper, who's the co-host of the show. He was a salesman at Cox Media Group, and their program director had an opening slot in their kind of financial section of their programming. And they were like, hey, do you have any ideas of, what we could do for this slot, Sundays at 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. And Eric was like, well, have you thought about doing something with cryptocurrency or, stuff like that? And he's like, no. He's like, actually, I've never even heard anybody doing that on the radio. And this is like not only one of the top performing radio stations in Oklahoma, but this radio station has won national awards over and over again. And they've got this cult following. And yes, a lot of the listeners are geared towards the baby boomer generation. But when Eric approached me about the idea, because Eric was like, listen, you're the only the guy that I know that could talk for an hour about this stuff. And have it be entertaining. And so he's like, do you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, man. I was like, absolutely. Because like I got into the space, like I started buying Bitcoin when it was roughly around $800 in 2017, and just been head first into the space ever since. And for me, I just wanted to get the word out. I wanted to let people know about how our money system works, why it's going to fail, what they can do to protect themselves, why Bitcoin matters. And so, I've been this annoying guy on social media in my, small network of people that I have here in Tulsa. And it's actually paid off because now, people know me in Tulsa as one of the leading thought leaders in Tulsa and even Oklahoma. I've had the opportunity to go speak to the legislature in Oklahoma. I helped author some of the first legislation in Oklahoma around the subject matter. Now, in 2019, I was a little early. So obviously there was a lot of hesitation, and it was back in the day when it was, blockchain, not Bitcoin, that big narrative that was going on. And so I was just simply trying to educate, and my bills got killed in committee. They never got to the floor for a vote because there was the chairwoman of the committee that my bills were in. She was running for Congress at the time, and these bankers that were funding her campaign basically told her to kill the bills. And so, yeah, it's been an uphill battle, but there's another bill going through Oklahoma that is, creating tax incentives for Bitcoin miners. I think there's going to be a little more luck with that one. And now I'm getting invited to speak at local chambers of commerce here in Oklahoma. And I just finished one in Shawnee, Oklahoma, sharing them about what's coming and why they should care. And the room was filled with a bunch of bankers, community bankers. And I said, listen, guys, hey, your option is either Bitcoin or this central bank digital currency that's coming out. And trust me, you don't want a central bank digital currency because this is going to undermine your business model. I was like, not that I'm a big fan of the banking model in general, but I was like, if anything, you should be fighting for Bitcoin, not for these central bank digital currencies. So that's kind of been my road, my journey in the space. And my goal is to just kind of expose more baby boomers to the space. I mean, people, I remember last year I was at Bitcoin 2021 and I was wearing this shirt, asked me about my Bitcoin radio show. And I had people going like, why are you doing radio? That's so old school. And I said, man, listen, I said, first of all, I'm double dipping because every time I go live on the air, I'm getting a high quality product that is reproduced and then turned into a podcast, and then I can gain online listenership. But so second of all, baby boomers are the ones that are listening to the radio. They need to know about Bitcoin. They have all the money. And if we want to grow the space, let me correct myself. They have all the currency, not all the money. And so if we want to grow the space, we got to throw a wide net and we got to bring these people in. And I can't tell you how many times I have gotten this comment, which is, Matt, I've heard about Bitcoin. I got into my car and I turned on the radio and I heard you talking about it and I just started listening. And that's what, caused me to go down this journey. And so unless these baby boomers are on the internet and these algorithms on YouTube or other platforms know or think that they might be interested in this content, they're not going to find it. And so I am literally trying to be a blanket exposure.
I love the pieces that where you're connected with the legislature and pushing new legislature and trying to inform, the people that don't know anything. That's interesting. You mentioned a piece in there. You said that you guys were, I think you said in 2019, maybe it was in Oklahoma City, you guys were working on some stuff. And you said that the people who were funding a large portion of that political person's campaign said to kill the bill.
Right.
So who are those types of people or entities that are opposing Bitcoin being furthered as far as legislation? And then I guess the question before that is, what kind of legislation were you guys pushing? Was it for very generalized regulations, or what kind of stuff was it that you guys were writing, and who was pushing back on that?
Yeah. So basically what I did was I took what Wyoming did back in the day. Caitlin's Long group, Caitlin Long, I'm sure you guys are familiar with her. She's got a group that she had in Wyoming, and they got some wonderful legislation passed that was very friendly to the industry, basically saying, hey, the state's not going to come after your assets. We're going to build some frameworks here. We're going to keep the hands-off approach. And so that was kind of, I just didn't want them to try to regulate things like Bitcoin, like a security. And so, I just basically copied and pasted what they did. And I was trying to get it, through the legislature. But the people that were opposing it, were just naive bankers at the time. And so now that trend is changing. Obviously, we've got banks in Tulsa, Vast Bank, which was the first bank in the country to offer custodian services around Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And then they're going to eventually offer some, platform where you can borrow against your Bitcoin. So, I mean, that's, whether that's right or wrong, that's for a whole nother conversation. But if I can just get these bankers out of the way and get them to be at least accepting to what is taking place, then great. But, for the most part, it has been an uphill battle, but it's slowly turning. The lieutenant governor is really interested in having Oklahoma kind of incentivize the whole mining industry. I mean, they're watching what's happening to our neighbor to the south in Texas. And we're always, we're always Texas's little brother. And I've told many lawmakers, I was like, listen, guys, we had a chance to lead on this, but you didn't. And so now we're going to be following Texas once again, which is fine, I guess. I mean, that's our MO. But hey, we're doing what we can.
Now, you mentioned Bitcoin versus central bank digital currencies. Do you feel like that's the greatest threat to Bitcoin adoption is the central bank digital currency? Do you feel
actually,
how far do you feel like Bitcoin's adoption goes? Like where do you see Bitcoin really playing out in the end? And then, central bank digital currency, like what's really in the way of getting it to your Bitcoin end goal? Because everybody sees this thing ending up somewhere different. Not everybody really agrees how far Bitcoin can go.
Yeah, I don't actually believe that there is a real threat to Bitcoin out there. I think Bitcoin has already won the battle. And so for me, I look at it as Bitcoin is that level one store of value, the ultimate asset the best kind of collateral that you can have. It is going to be the best form of money the world has ever seen for a digital age. Absolutely. But the central bank digital currencies, the reason why I make that parallel is not that I think central bank digital currencies are a threat to Bitcoin. I just don't want people to be naive and get sucked in to this. Hey, go to the Federal Reserve's website, download this app. We'll give you $10,000 of the new crypto dollars or whatever they want to call it. And then they're stuck in a nanny state that's constantly monitoring, tracking, and controlling their lives and their finances. And so I basically am telling people, like, listen, do you want freedom or do you want oppression? Because this tool or this technology is much like a gun. It can be used to liberate or it can be used to oppress. Do you want a closed system or do you want an open system? Do you want a transparent system? Do you want a system that, is the full nodes, and if there is a mining component to any of it, it's all going to be controlled by an elite group of people? So I'm just trying to create the parallel. Like, know what you are getting ready to accept, because these changes are coming. And there's two camps. There's one camp that is centralized and wants control and wants the status quo to continue. And there's one camp that wants freedom and individuality and permissionless. I mean, to me, I think there's two different pathways. I think regardless of what the state tries to do or what any other altcoin tries to do, nobody is competing against Bitcoin. Bitcoin has already won its battle. It's just inevitable. Bitcoin is inevitable. Flat out.
You bring up a couple of, several interesting pieces here. I love the idea of, and we had kind of talked about this. There's all these altcoins. There's Bitcoin, there's Ethereum, there's Shiba Inu, there's Dogecoin. Everybody hears about the larger names. Everybody hears about those. I do think I agree with you there in that there's all of these other pieces that are doing what they're doing, whatever that is, depending on the project and all that stuff. You've got, of course, you've also got to wrap into that, like NFTs come in somewhere, and there's just like this whole space that so many people don't know about what's going on, right? And even for Griff and I, like, and I guess I'll just speak for myself, but having dove into the space, like, there's stuff about NFTs and crypto just in general that I'm like, I'm not really sure what this is or what's going on here, or how this works. And I got to imagine for, to your point, right, the baby boomer generation that hasn't looked into this at all, it's probably extremely polarizing, where it's all this and that's happening and what you've done and what this and that. There's a lot of like pointing the finger at other groups of people as far as generations, right? And I think what you're doing is really interesting in that, do we want people to believe in Bitcoin? Sure, absolutely. But at the end of the day, if we can plant a seed in somebody's mind to make them think about this stuff, right? So that they can have somewhat of a foundation to push off of, to maybe create a little bit more curiosity to go out and figure out what it is for themselves. To form their own opinions. That's big time, man.
What I would like to ask too, to go on top of because I don't really think anything's competing with Bitcoin either. We're talking about the best monetary network the world's ever seen, and it happened in 13 years. So like, where is it going to go from here? And I think that's what I'd like to ask you, since you've been here since 2017 and you're working on the legislation. How far do you see Bitcoin going? Because it disintermediates banks. It disintermediates, really like international trade. Who's to say it can't really like displace a government or shake up America to the point where it is the driving factor in a split over here in the States? Because obviously some people want that nanny money and some people very much so don't, because they realize a world built in socialism or communism, which would be even worse, has never worked out. And worlds built on free markets, which Bitcoin is the greatest free market the world has ever seen. How far can Bitcoin take us? Because if we're working on the legislation, sometimes I'm just like, why can't we let's just go somewhere else, guys. Like, I don't know, like, let's just pick it up and move it somewhere else. Kind of like that SpongeBob episode,
No, I agree. I think, again, going back to that whole thing, Bitcoin is inevitable. I think the only reason why I'm working on legislation is not because I think Bitcoin needs legislation, but there's a lot of old thinking and legacy money that is only going to be comfortable if they have these perceived guardrails. Now, could there be a point in the future where it doesn't even matter because they are going to be forced to enter the space and buy Bitcoin? Absolutely. But if their wealth is trapped in this machine of just debt and slavery and just, you know, all these institutions, they've got a lot of wealth, you know, currently. But if they're going to survive, at some point they're going to have to put it into Bitcoin. You know, I think for the most part, I'm doing legislation to start a conversation, to get people thinking on this stuff, and to not necessarily say, hey, Bitcoin needs legislation per se, but if we can just say, hey, the state's going to take a hands-off approach, a free market approach, then it gives these institutions, it gives this legacy wealth a little bit more comfort to enter the space. Because, you know, for the longest time, it's been, you know, not quite as much today as it was, you know, years ago, which was Bitcoin was for drug dealers and, you know, pornographers and all this other, you know, black market stuff. But I just think that, you know, the legislation is kind of like the switch in these people's minds that, oh, it's okay, like I can actually participate in this. And guess what? Regardless of whether it's me or somebody else, people are going to put forth legislation. So why not have friendly Bitcoiners put forth legislation? Because guess what? If I'm not doing it, some, you know, progressive commie or some, you know, dollar lover or central bank influencer is going to do something. So like, why not be us?
That's beautiful. I saw a tweet. Speaking of Griff, speaking of the best tweet of the week, I saw a tweet and it was it said, Bitcoiners don't trust, verify, and then it said, fiaters trust the government, don't verify. It's like, yikes, you know. But that's real. That like it's funny to simplify it into such a basic statement, but it's like that's kind of right where we're at, right? I mean.
Do you have any orange pilling stories of a baby boomer that you're proud of that you would share? I mean, like, do you have one that's like really great, like pretty funny? You were able to
So actually, my dad. So my dad's been pretty successful in business, and our family's in fundraising. And 2 years ago, I basically told him that his companies needed to buy a company called the Giving Block, which is basically an API that you know, offers nonprofits the ability to accept cryptocurrency for donations. And this company will actually solicit on their behalf to the crypto community in order to incentivize, you know, people in the space to donate crypto to offset any capital gains tax that they might have. And so I really kind of liked their model. And I told the CEO and I told my dad, I was like, hey guys, I think you guys need to buy this company and integrate it into your services. Cause I think, you know, cryptocurrency donations are going to be a thing in the future, especially for nonprofits. And today we're seeing a lot of it. I can't tell you how many times I get asked internally about this subject matter. And a lot of nonprofits saying, hey, can you show me how to accept cryptocurrency? Well, guess what? Like a couple months ago, the CEO and my dad called me and they were like, hey, what was that name of that company that you told us to buy like 2 years ago? I was like, oh yeah, the Giving Block. They're like, yeah, it got bought out for $300 million. And so I was like, well, I mean, I told you. I mean, like, but at the same time, it was like, okay, they're like, oh, yeah, Bitcoin's the future. So that was a very pivotal moment. But I thought that was a fun story.
That's good. Changing direction a little bit. We were talking, earlier about the banking system. We talked a lot about the traditional banking system. And I know that here recently, I've seen just tons and tons, and I think you guys have too, about all the energy consumption. Oh my God, Bitcoin's going to destroy the world. It's going to cook everything, this and that and this and that, right? And I was listening to, I love Bitcoin Audible. I love listening to the Bitcoin Audible articles and stuff, the quick read, the crypto quick reads. Let's say that 6 times fast. love listening to those, but was listening to some stuff about the energy consumption, and I think he may have mentioned it in passing, but it made me think about, it's not like the Bitcoin mining industry is just additional consumption. It's going to replace what is already consuming, right? It's not like it's not like we have the banking system and then crypto comes in on top of it. Crypto displaces Bitcoin displaces the traditional banking system, right? So then we got to think, okay, Bitcoin consumption or a Bitcoin energy consumption through the mining process, what is that to be compared to? Is that to be compared to the amount of energy that is consumed by the politicians and people that work within the Fed? Or okay, maybe. What about all the current branches, all the physical branches of the banks? How much energy do they consume? Just the buildings alone. You got
Right.
electric costs, HVAC, maybe gas, water. Like how much energy does that consume? And then there's also data centers, right? Like there's completely online banks like Ally, who we use for certain things. They're complete online banks, but they run servers and all that stuff to keep their information protected. I don't know if you guys listened to or read that press release from Fidelity, but they said that their platform is going to bring institutional grade security, which I thought was hilarious. It's like, guys, Bitcoin is the most powerful network. But anyways, so what are your thoughts on that? I know that the energy consumption FUD has been wild, but this is to be compared to the entire banking system, branches, the federal government, and how much time and energy they're consuming in that realm. All of the electric costs for running all of these centralized databases. I mean, that's a lot more energy. And there was some research that was done that I was reading where it was showing some of the numbers, some of the rough numbers on the consumption of the traditional banking industry, and Bitcoin was like 0.001% of that consumption. But we also got to think, it's not like we're just burning energy to make money. It's not like Bitcoin mining has no purpose, right? It protects the protocol of Bitcoin itself, which is the most powerful computer network in the world. It's fixed, scarce money. It's decentralized. It allows people to lower their time preference and think about the future. And so my thought here is that the Bitcoin mining energy consumption is it's not just additional consumption, it's replacing and displacing what is currently in place. And it's much more efficient, which is really cool. And then the second piece is that Bitcoin mining and the energy consumption that goes into the network is the preservation of the future of humanity. It's a necessary energy consumption. And it's kind of similar to the Industrial Revolution, right? Are we using more or less energy after the Industrial Revolution? A ton more, right? But it's also increased living standards. Sure, it displaced and made a lot of people's jobs obsolete, but it created a ton more as well. What are your thoughts on that, Matt? I know that you've talked a little bit about the energy consumption. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I was actually on public television here in Oklahoma, and I was debating a economics professor from OSU, and I was debating a financial advisor. And then there was me and my buddy Chris, who is a Bitcoin miner. I don't mine Bitcoin, but he's obviously well more versed in the mining realm. But I made the points. I said, guys, let's look at the utility value of what Bitcoin is doing. And in order to understand the utility value of Bitcoin, you first have to understand what is a fair form of money. Money is a representation of our time, labor, energy, freedom. It's our life force, right? Okay. And what makes something a fair form of money is when both the producer and the user have to spend time, labor, and energy and resources to A, either bring it into existence, or B, work for it. Right now, the system that we have doesn't function that way. And so, and if you take a look at the petrodollar system, yes, currently the current banking system and the gold mining industry, Bitcoin only uses about half as much energy as those two industries do. But if you look at the petrodollar, we have to back the dollar by military guns. We have to protect trade routes. We have to incentivize OPEC nations to trade their oil in dollars. And in order to do that and secure the title of world reserve currency, we have to spend billions and trillions of dollars into a military. Basically, we're printing money from thin air in order to fund this. And I said, and how many fossil fuels does the military use? And we use 4.6 billion gallons of fossil fuels a year to make sure the military keeps going and does what it does. And so, if we want to talk about, carbon footprint, let's talk about the fiat dollar system. Okay. Right now, Bitcoin incentivizes people to find the cheapest energy. And guess what? The cheapest energy isn't always fossil fuels. That's actually renewable energy in remote places. And so you need to build an incentive structure that makes renewable energy more viable. And I believe that it's going to be more and more in the future. It's already headed in that direction. That most of Bitcoin's energy consumption is going to be renewable energy. Just because something consumes energy doesn't necessarily means or equates to carbon footprint. And so I think that's what people have to realize. And I think Bitcoin will end up winning this narrative and this FUD that's being put out there. Because, if humanity is going to progress, if humanity is going to advance, we have to have the ability to capture the entire energy production of the planet. I don't know if you've heard Charlie talk about this, but there's the type 1, type 2, type 3 civilizations. The type 1 is a civilization that's able to harness the full energy capacity of their planet. Type 2, I believe, is the solar system, and type 3 is its galaxy. And humanity, we haven't captured the entire energy production of the planet. And when I say capturing the energy production of the planet, that doesn't mean it has to be CO2 or carbon emissions or carbon footprint. Like, we're talking about the ability and the incentive structure to go to remote places and use hydro, wind, solar in all of its capacity and harness energy in these places where it was not viable before to economically to use that energy, to transport that energy from point A to point B. And so I think actually Bitcoin helps us as a humanity advance forward by giving us the ability to enhance the production and use of our energy in a more efficient way.
That's if you want if you want these rural places and these small countries to develop. Obviously, there seems to be some powers that be that don't. I mean, do you have anything that you've thought about or seen recently where it's just like, these guys don't want to see the Central African Republic grow? I mean, because what we're kind of talking about, right? Like, you're monetizing wasted energy, which gives us an entire kind of like a new industry to fill with jobs, to fill with people who need to work, to fill with all kinds of new cool ideas. And not to mention how many different companies can be built in kind of a decentralized money landscape, right? So I guess I would like to take this to what's happened with Twitter, with Elon. Do you kind of feel like Twitter, like, do you think he's going to make a push and actually do something with that platform in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and kind of decentralize it? Do you think he's doing it for, some people think he's doing it for AI to help out with his robots so that they actually have free speech? Shoot, some people think that Elon is just going to give it back to the developers and open source it and kind of just like, not like he's wasting his money, but at the same time, he's not really looking to do a whole lot with it. He was just trying to piss people off. Do you see, like, where do you see Bitcoin playing in kind of the Twitter space, but also just like developing and like building a lot of industries and changing a lot of industries really into something completely different?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I think to your guys' earlier point, I mean, I think, regardless of what happens, I think people are going to be incentivized to adopt and use and leverage the Bitcoin ecosystem in whatever they're doing. I mean, the comment that I make all the time when I go to speak at some of these chambers of commerce is, just like the internet, disrupted multiple industries and touches every part of our life, so will Bitcoin. And so even to a greater degree, because we're talking about a peer-to-peer network that is essentially money and value, but and energy, the monetization of energy. But I don't, as far as Elon goes and Twitter goes, I don't know exactly how that picture is all going to work out. I do know that Elon has gone through a evolutionary process. I think he's kind of slowly taking a more friendlier stance to Bitcoin. But the one thing I can't, I'm not 100% certain about him or anybody else because we're all
hard to be.
What's that?
I think it's hard to be just with billionaires and the way our current monetary system is set up. They really do have, I don't want to say an inequitable amount of power because that brings in a whole host of different discussions.
Right.
They have a lot of power that in a sound money world, it'd be really hard to achieve that amount of power in a Bitcoin standard, right? But you can go on. I mean, like Elon is his character. It's hard to figure that guy out. We don't know.
Yeah, it's obviously hard to figure him out, but I mean, he does say good things every once in a while. He says more good things than I think he says bad things, and especially when it comes to his opinion on AI. I mean, he's always had whether he's right or wrong. A lot of times he just needs a little bit more information and a little bit more time to consume it and think on it. But his approach has always been approach of caution and an approach of innovation and break the rules and think outside the box. And like, if there's one billionaire that I was going to have to put all my trust in, like, not that I want to, it would probably be Elon.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think that's fair. I think I would, if we're playing the pick billionaire game, I would probably pick him as well. I mean, I don't know who else would even come close. Obviously, there's just a lot of other billionaires in the world, the people he bought Twitter from, for example. So it's just like, yeah, I don't know who else we can trust. Or I'd like to just trust a new monetary network so that we could, somehow like get out from under where we're at right now. That would be kind of great.
Right.
But I don't know. The other thing that I wanted to touch on with Matt is what was the whole Compass mining thing? Like, I don't understand. I don't understand. First of all, I don't really understand what the big deal is about Compass mining. Are they trying to basically make it easier for people to mine in a sense? You know what I'm saying? Because as a perspective, I live in Sacramento, California. I could figure out some way to get these wind turbines and turn that into Bitcoin, I'd probably become a billionaire. I'm not that well versed yet to say that I could even think about doing that, right? But what is the deal with people getting mad at you for promoting a mining company? Like, is that essential? Because that's kind of what I saw.
Let me add on top of that too, because we had talked about this, and I love what your perspective on this is, Matt. There's a lot of Bitcoin maximalists, and I'll bring in the term toxic Bitcoin maximalism, in the sense that it's Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. Now, I would say it's Bitcoin and Bitcoin only, and I think Griff probably would as well. That being said, we also can't shut out everyone else that's playing the other games, right? I mean, Griff, you started there, right? That's how you ended up getting into Bitcoin, is through the crypto space in general.
Because
and Matt, I love your perspective on bridging the two together. So answer Griff's question there on the Compass mining piece, and then what are your thoughts on bridging the two spaces?
Right. Yeah. So I obviously am not well versed in the mining as much as my friend Charlie was, which he was on the show. And so when this all happened, I actually had to ask Charlie. I was like, Charlie, why are these maxis attacking me because I posted this picture of me wearing this t-shirt and thanking Compass Mining for sponsoring Bitcoin Day, which is a touring event that actually came to Oklahoma City that I spoke at, along with other Bitcoiners from around the country who could be classified as your toxic maxis. And so, I didn't know the history behind this, but Charlie went on to tell me, he goes, well, Compass Mining has promised a lot of people and have taken a lot of people's money in return to plug-in miners and have people benefit by, getting to the benefits of mining without having to, run miners. Well, the problem is Compass Mining is having all the same problems as all the other miners is they don't have enough places to plug in these machines. So they're not following through or delivering with their products or services or what they're offering people. And so it's people are coming out saying it's a scam and people are losing money and these guys are, just horrible and all this stuff. And listen, I don't claim to know all the details. I have not worked with Compass Mining. I have not used them. So I don't know the ins and the outs of it. But what I do know is there is a hell of a lot of hypocrisy in the Bitcoin space, especially when it comes to the toxic maxi space, because I'm like, guys, I was like, if you have such a problem with Compass Mining and you want to chew my butt for it, why did you even come to the conference that they were one of the premier sponsors at, and you spoke at? I was like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like you can't do it both ways. Like, so, pick your side. And I was listening to Dan Held. I know you guys are familiar with Dan Held, and Dan Held's, shares a very similar sentiment. And I'm going to quote him. This was from a recent interview that he was doing with Peter McCormick. And they were talking about this toxic community. And basically, he made the point that early on in Bitcoin's culture and values, the defense mechanism or the protectionism or the quote unquote, I don't know if you'd call it toxic, because back then it probably wasn't toxic. It actually had a purpose, which was to protect things like the 21 million hard cap, the block sizes, reducing the influence of powerful people to impact decisions on the protocol single-handedly. And so this community, since Bitcoin has essentially won, essentially Bitcoin is that hard money. Bitcoin is that base layer for the digital economy. Nobody is competing with Bitcoin. It's almost like this protectionism has turned into this autoimmune disease, and now there's all this friendly fire. And so, there's no major external threat to Bitcoin. None of the other protocols will compete against Bitcoin in what Bitcoin is doing. And so, I think we got to be very careful, because the ethos of Bitcoin is this very libertarian idea of live and let live, and let freedom reign, and let people make good decisions, bad decisions. The good ones are going to win regardless. And so, I don't want to see Bitcoin and Bitcoiners turn into this cancel culture or progressive nanny state, which it's kind of turning into. And just because I said the word Litecoin or Compass mining, now I'm going to get attacked. Like, I'm just having a conversation, and I want to have, I want to stay curious. Okay. Like, yes, Bitcoin won. Nothing's going to compete with Bitcoin, but I don't want to be naive to what's going on around us, because yes, most of the altcoins act like securities. So what? People invest in securities all the time. They invest in stock markets. They invest in all these things. And it's not that the elements of this technology development or different protocols can't be useful or helpful in the future. It's just a free market of ideas, people failing and people succeeding. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't see any of this as a threat to Bitcoin. Bitcoin, again, like I said, Bitcoin has won. So, for me, it's kind of like the toxic maxi mentality has turned into a religion, like a real religion for people. And I equate it to, like, I'm a Christian. And so for me, the thing that attracted me to Christianity in a lot of ways was, it's this mentality of relationship over religion. And yes, there are some very toxic Christians as well. But I almost equate it to, like, these Bitcoin maxis are becoming these Pharisees where like, they want to throw stones at the woman who committed adultery. And Jesus is like, hey, who here has, who sinned? Who else here has sinned? Like, throw the first stone if you haven't sinned. And they all drop their stones and walk away. I mean, like, yes, we all make mistakes. Yes, we all, go through a journey. But I don't think that should kill our curiosity or stop a discussion or close people out from the Bitcoin community. Because I actually don't see any of these protocols a threat to Bitcoin.
Absolutely. That's really interesting, tying it back to the radio show and reaching an older generation. What do you think are and I would think that it's got to muddy the waters for let's just call it the baby boomers that maybe haven't done the research, right? And then they try to look into it, and then there's like all million of these different things, and there's this and there's that, and Bitcoin's supposed to be the original, it's supposed to be the one, but there's these other 6 things. What are these things? What are your thoughts on how that can muddy the water for people that haven't done the research? Obviously, the only answer for all of this stuff is you just got to dive in and do your own research, right? But on the front end, looking from the outside in, that for sure has got to muddy the waters, especially for older people that aren't so much in the know.
Yeah. So my show is primarily focused on Bitcoin. Yes. Have I talked about NFTs and what is an NFT and what's the definition of DeFi? Like, yeah, I'm going to have those kind of conversations, but again, it's not because I think it's better than Bitcoin. It's literally, I just want to stay curious. I want to present this information to people in the right manner and say, hey, listen, Bitcoin is what you need to focus on. Me and Charlie share the same sentiment. When we hold the Bitcoin meetups, come to the Bitcoin meetup. And if you are a total crypto degenerate and you want to come to the meeting, we welcome you. But our focus at the meeting is going to be Bitcoin. And if you want to go off to the side and talk about these other altcoins and what's going on in that space, yeah, sure, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But like, I just want to make sure that we as Bitcoiners are not closing off, the conversation and that we're still being friendly. Because here's the truth. Bitcoin doesn't need us to win. Like I believe that. I think Bitcoin has already won. I think the people that are in it are in it. I think Bitcoin's going to attract more capital. It's going to attract more people. It's inevitable. That's my personal opinion. But I want the baby boomers to focus on Bitcoin because that's where you need to start. That's to understand what's going on in the space. You have to understand what money is, and you have to understand what Bitcoin is and how Bitcoin is solving that.
That's interesting. You bring up a couple of pieces there. So, thinking about baby boomers focusing on Bitcoin, and this is something that I've thought about a little bit, just talking with, I guess more so family for me at this point. That's, I guess probably 40 and above. They're like, okay, so it makes sense because you're really young and there's all this future ahead. Talking with Brian, right, with Choice App last week, talking about giving the ability to hold Bitcoin in an IRA, a Roth IRA. I mean, over the next, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that for, somebody that's just about to enter retirement? I mean, it feels more volatile right now, right? I mean, the system is not exactly in place right now for us to be, we're just going to hop on, be a Bitcoin standard. I don't think that we're super far away, right? But it's kind of strange because we are still operating in a fiat world, whether we like it or not. I'm really interested to hear Brian's thoughts on how he's utilizing Bitcoin as his checking account, as his banking account, is what he was talking about. Because that doesn't quite make sense to me yet in this world. So I'm interested to hear his thoughts on that. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on how you kind of organize, like, how does Bitcoin play a role in your personal finances? But and then are the older generations at this point just treating it as a speculative asset, in that, hey, we think that in the short term this is going to go up? Well, or are they looking at it as it's going to be the change, this is going to be the money that we use?
Well, that's what I want them to understand. I want them to understand that this is the future of money. This is the base layer of value. Like, and I want them to measure the world in Bitcoin and not in dollars. Like, that's the mentality that I want them to have. And this change of the monetary systems it's not like it's going to be this one point in history or one single moment where everything's just going to change over. You've got one system that's dying and one system that's rising, and it's just, they're going to overlap each other. And it's like Bitcoin is that life raft. And yes, will baby boomers end up using traditional, investment vehicles that they're familiar with, where they can actually get exposure to Bitcoin? Sure, there's nothing wrong with that. But hey, if you're a baby boomer, also learn how to hold your own Bitcoin in a cold storage wallet. Learn how to manage a private seed phrase and private keys. And so I encourage both of it, because I think it's we've got.
Oh,
and are we here? Are we
connected? There you go. You're back. You're back.
Yeah, so like I hear all the time, like, can you just manage it for me? And I'm like, no, I'm not a money manager. I'm here to teach you how to fish. I'm here to teach you how to do this safely. And so I think it's just going to be a process. I mean, like, there's plenty of people in my family who didn't start using email to 2005. Like, there's going to be some late adopters to this, but I think the more that we can make some noise and the more that we can educate people. Guys, I got to plug in my computer real quick. Hold on.
No worries.
It's going to die.
I think you asked a really good question, though, Nick. And I mean, like, it is hard for Bitcoin to play a role in the finance aspect of it. But as innovations like Strike, adding it to the APR systems at McDonald's and got like that whole list, and Shopify integrating the Lightning Network, I kind of think that aspect of it really can speed it up. I think it's just more, it like kind of goes to the point why it's going to be so hard to hold your Bitcoin over the next let's say you're you really view this as the long term, and you know Bitcoin's going to be worth 10 million, 100 million, whatever. It's really has an infinite value because it's changing the way money is going to work with society. It's going to be hard to hold on to it because there's going to be a lot of people that build onto Bitcoin that make it easy for you to spend it because they're integrating it into like the medium of exchange side of the world. So I kind of just think my question was going to be more like, what do you think is the next big innovation of Bitcoin? Because obviously Strike adding it to all of these businesses that are now going to be able to accept it. The Lightning Network is a big deal. What's the next big innovation of Bitcoin that's going to be like, wow, like this thing is like right in our face? Because obviously the more real it becomes is when you have a QR code at your dinner table and they give you a check and you just go, cool. Like I don't have to, sign the check. I don't have to like do all this stuff. It just boom, thanks, sats, move on with your day. Like, what do you think is the next big innovation and how far are we from that world?
This is a question for me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
No, you're just our guest.
Okay.
Whoever's listening.
Whoever's listening out there.
Yeah. Okay. So I think Lightning Network is going to be huge. I think, when you've got, Lightning Network is in front of people's faces and you got people like Apple, integrating it into Apple Pay or something like that, that's going to be huge. But, when you look at something like Bitcoin becoming money, obviously you've probably heard this before. It goes through these evolutionary phases where first it's a collectible, then it's a store of value, then it becomes a medium of exchange, and then it becomes a true measure of wealth. Well, I think we need to see a whole lot more institutions, companies, people using it as a store of value before we really start seeing it as a medium of exchange. I think this evolution, could speed up. I think, you hear a lot of people say it's, slow and steady, and then all of a sudden, especially if we're on the brink of the traditional financial system just absolutely falling apart, which we could be, and I believe in that mindset. But I think the innovation is going to be that the mindset changes, that people see Bitcoin for what it is, because the biggest problem right now is you have all of these institutional investors seeing Bitcoin as some kind of risky tech stock. And it's like, that's the wrong way to treat it. I mean, you've got this cohort or this core group of people who really understand Bitcoin, who are hodling it, treating it correctly. And then you've got the majority of these people who are either traders or speculative, tech investors or institutional investors who are treating it this way. And that's why I think we see a lot of correlation to traditional markets right now. But I do think there's going to be a pivotal moment or this inflection point where all of that changes. But as far as innovation goes, I definitely think payments is going to be a part of it, but I don't think we're going to get to that payment part until people start using it as a real store of value, which again, mass majority of people who are entering in the space, especially from 2020 to 2021, aren't really seeing it as a store of value. They're seeing it as a speculative asset.
Yeah, it's such an interesting, it's weird to see which one will truly get adopted first, because like we're saying, money typically follows this path and adoption, but Bitcoin, it has people working on it from all of the angles. So where it really breaks, I guess that's kind of what I say when I say this is not financial advice, but when you're investing in something, how many different things can Bitcoin really get its hands in? It's like a lot of different things, just because that's the network of it, the money aspect of it, the retirement savings of it, even the digital property argument I've heard to Jason Lowry, which I don't know if everybody loves Jason Lowry, but I like his hash force idea. I think it's a good idea, because why, like in these type 1, 2, 3 civilizations, right, where hopefully humanity can get to at one point. We would love to be able to say that we can get to Mars and back, that we can kind of fix the world's problems, whatever. To get there, you have to be able to utilize your money better than we do right now.
Right.
And money does have to change, whether it is Bitcoin or it is a central bank digital currency or it is Ethereum, which I think that might be the worst of all of the three. But money does have to change in the next 50 years, I would say, or else we will face a collapse like you're talking about, because it's like like where are we going to go? Like we can't get more inflationary. Inflation does cause a huge wealth gap, and it's causing it it feels like I was talking about this last week. It feels like it used to be rich and poor. Now it's kind of like if you're middle class, you're kind of becoming poor. And when you attack any country's middle class, let alone America's middle class, one, it doesn't really typically get perceived very well. And two, it's going to destroy I would say we're still probably one of the healthier, economically speaking, one of the healthier countries in the world, or at least one of the most powerful. So when we destroy our middle class, like, I don't know if that'll be the change in mindset we're thinking of. I hope. It's kind of getting to a point where people are going to be faced with the decision. Okay, like, do I have a savings account in dollars, or do I have it in Bitcoin, or do I have it on strike so I can kind of like play both sides of it? I don't know. I kind of think I don't know the developer side of these things, but it would be cool to see a few more applications built for Bitcoin. It would be cool to see, a lot of these peer-to-peer type transactions that can be just validated on the Lightning Network with a simple little Lightning payment, meet its way into healthcare somehow. Like take its way. My biggest thing is I work with a lot of physicians with my job, and it's like, they have to pay tens of thousands of dollars just to be like American board certified, just to deal with the FDA, just to deal with all this regulation. Feels like Bitcoin can dip its hand even into a lot of those intermediaries where it's just like, if you can just validate with one little Lightning payment, all of a sudden these physicians can be board certified without tens of thousands of dollars of fake testing and it being bought. I kind of think that could push Bitcoin to a new level as well if but I don't know what all the developers are doing. There's poker rooms where you can pay with Bitcoin, but are there going to be new robust networks in Bitcoin, or do you think maybe that's where altcoins do play a role, where they forget the token aspect of their business, they somehow integrate with Bitcoin, and they take their use cases they talk about, because there are use cases out there. Netflix and all of those streaming platforms could be disintermediated to a degree, right? Like you could just take the content straight to the people. Like it'd be nice if Marvel Studios could just drop their movie on Twitter and you just pay for it right there on Twitter. You don't have to go through all the BS to do it. Do you think that there is a future for that with Bitcoin? Do you think that there will be these cool decentralized applications and kind of new companies, new platforms, or do you think that's even more distant than the money side of it?
Well, the way I look at, Bitcoin is, Bitcoin is creating this new financial system, and it's kind of emulating and I think what's going to happen, it's going to emulate what has traditionally been done, in the sense that Bitcoin's that base store value layer, just like gold was in the analog world. And then we built layers on top of gold. And you guys have heard this, you got the gold backed currencies. And obviously, yes, we left the pegs a long time ago, but then you had the checks and the credit cards and then the fintech and stuff like that. And so I think as these layers get built on top of Bitcoin, I think you're going to see different things integrate into this ecosystem, but everybody's going to be measuring this whole entire world in the value of Bitcoin and what Bitcoin is and what Bitcoin has done. And so, like, when I hear about other protocols or other blockchains or other use cases for this stuff, like, I'll be the first one to tell you, like, yes, I think Bitcoin has won, but I'm also not naive to believe that there aren't going to be other protocols used for other things. And yes, it may be integrated on top of some of these other layers that are built on top of Bitcoin, and that's perfectly fine.
That's something I like discussing more than I think that's kind of the fun conversation that Bitcoin gets left out of a lot, and maxis might not like it, but there is some use to NFTs out there, right? Like that we could find. It's just that we don't want to break the money side of it. We don't want a bunch of companies with tokens, because that is that's securities fraud. It's a Ponzi scheme. It doesn't work. But on the other side, there is good innovation out there outside of just fixing the money. You can fix a lot of review boards. It'd be nice to fix a lot of things.
Think about title companies, right? For purchases of real estate, those types of things, for sure.
Yeah, because you still have real world assets. You still live in the real world.
Yeah, I was listening to Saylor talk on that Lex Friedman podcast about how Bitcoin will eventually have this layer 4, like NASDAQ built onto it and things like that. Like in the Bitcoin world, there will be these great financial institutions. And even better yet, this goes back to, I'm just thinking of what Nick said, maybe it was 2 weeks ago or last week, Nick, where you're talking about, well, buying Bitcoin is kind of like buying real estate in Manhattan, except for on a much larger scale, because you're kind of taking that scarcity of Manhattan real estate and you're distributing it all over the world. And currently, pretty much everybody has like an equal opportunity to go build onto it or do something amazing with it or be the next Rockefeller in Bitcoin. But, I mean, honestly, it just takes a lot of next level thinking, because everything, has to be played out in a lot of steps. But do you think that Bitcoin, does this price action, like, what have you been thinking about it going from 40 to 60? Do you even care? Are you a one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin person as well? Or how do you see it playing out for the rest of the year for your boomers that would be listening to your radio show?
Yeah, I'm definitely a one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. But the challenge is calming everybody's fears, because they still measure stuff in dollars. It's like I was having a conversation. I think it was with you, Nick. I was like, I have a universal, insurance policy, and I took $10,000 out of it and bought some more Bitcoin, and because I don't want dollar denominated investment vehicles, and because I see the dollar going to crap. And so, for me, like, I just have to remind people, that this is a slow process. It's not a get rich quick thing. But, if you can equate it to, if you can get them to understand that the current thing that they're using and that they're measuring value in is dying and enslaving them, then they can slowly start to change their mindset. And so I think that's really the battle that I fight is, yeah, sure. Is it fun for them to see it go up in dollar price? Yeah, sure it is. But that's just because that's where their mindset is. But for me, I'm not concerned about it. I mean, I've been in the space for 6 years now, and it's just, over, if your, time horizon is pretty wide, or, out there, it's higher highs and higher lows. I don't really watch the daily price action.
It is interesting to think about where we're at today, looking forward into the future, and we can talk and speculate about what the Bitcoin standard will be in the future. And that's obviously the fun, exciting conversation. Another one that's interesting is where we're at right now today. I mean, I said it earlier, talking about people that are denominating life already right now in Bitcoin. I don't know if that means like, oh, I'm going to go get gas. And then it's like, oh, I paid, $50 to fill up my tank. How many sats is that, just to have a gauge of what that is? Like, I don't know. I don't know if that's what people are meaning by saying that they're denominating their life in Bitcoin already. But another conversation that Griff and I had, I think it was during the week this week, talking about currently in our system, saving is just not enough. You can't save, right? You can't just save. That's not really going to get you anywhere. You'll save, right? And as long as you're saving more dollars than are eroding over time, you will grow. Your savings will grow, right? Obviously, if you just let it sit over time, it's going to erode, right? But it's wild that today, because money is broken, we are forced into a position to have to be day traders. We gotta be stock market experts to know, do this, do that, do this, do that. And that's just to keep up, right? That's not taking risk and making big gains. That's like just keeping up, right? I mean, Michael Saylor's a huge proponent of the idea that inflation is not a scalar, but a vector, where it's not just 2 + 2 = 4. I mean, we're talking about much higher levels of math to really understand what's going on in the traditional financial system. But it's wild to think that, man, on a sound money standard, whether it's Bitcoin or anything else, if it's a sound money standard, man, you can just save. You can just save. And that's all you really have to do. If you want to preserve, right, to hit on your key terms, because Matt, you and I use the same words to describe money. It's economic, it's representation of economic value that is backed by the time and labor put in to produce or earn whatever we want to look at it as, right? But it's time and labor, capital expend to produce in the market or to earn whatever it is. If you want to forego the consumption of that economic value on a sound money standard, you can just save it. But today, if you just save it, it erodes over time, which is that's pretty wild. Now, I don't know. See, now I'll just play devil's advocate. At the same time, let's say that 2 years ago I went out and I did masonry in high school, so I would go out with my masonry teacher at Tulsa Tech, and we would build mailboxes on the weekends. We built like 5 or 6 of them over, I think like the year that I was there, and made a couple of bucks on the weekend and stuff. Well, I did that, and I store this value here. Is that as valuable? Is that mailbox as valuable today as whenever I put it together? I don't know. Maybe not. But I did expend time and labor in the market, right? We'll just call it the market to be the broad term, to meet some need in the market, right? Somebody needed their mailbox fixed or a new mailbox placed. Well, I met the need. My tech instructor and I met the need. We got money to pay for our raw expenses, and then we cut the profits and we part our ways. And now we met a demand in the market, and we got paid to do that. And now I could take that money and I could go consume it today, right? Maybe I want to go out and buy a steak dinner or something. We didn't make a ton of money. We made like $100 profit each or whatever, Maybe I want to go out and buy a real nice steak dinner because I want to celebrate. Oh, I built this mailbox, made some money. Now I can pay for a nice dinner for myself, whatever, right? Or I could save it and say, you know what? I'm going to use this for something later on in the future. I can save that, and that has the purchasing power that should have on a sound money standard, the purchasing power into perpetuity, right? Griff, that example you were talking about was it was a Michael Saylor deal where he talks about if you know what you know now, and if you could buy real estate in 1700 right in Manhattan, where Manhattan is, how much would you buy? And it's like, well, you'd buy as much as you could, right? Because you know where the value is going to be. And this feels to be the same exact thing with Bitcoin, in that it's a fixed supply, right? New York, Manhattan, there's not more island going to come up. They're not going to make more island, right? It is fixed. That amount of land is there, and there's no more. As is the same with Bitcoin, right? There's 21 million at this point, just over 19 million. And if I can buy more right now, so early on, I just saw a deal on Twitter the other day that was showing the bell curve of adoption, right? The early adopters, or the innovators, the early adopters, early majority, late majority, and then late adopters. And that innovators piece, I believe, innovators and early adopters, I think it's 2.5%, I guess, is that cutoff between innovators and early adopters, how they break it out. And I guess right now, people on the Bitcoin network has just hit 2.5% of the population, which is, it still shows us that we're way early on, right? If we think about way out into the future about what Bitcoin can do globally, I mean, these are some huge things that, man, if we could just save our money and it held its purchasing power into the future, that is such a huge thing that feels like it feels. I would use the phrase seemingly insignificant. It's like, oh yeah, I can save my money. Okay, cool. But like that has a huge impact on how people operate mentally in what they do day to day. The culture and mindset that starts to nurture and create within smaller communities, and then into larger communities, and now into cities and states and countries, and then the entire world, right? If we're all able to think more about the future, what is that going to do for us? And I think that's going to do a lot of really good stuff, whereas today, time preference is so high that we're thinking about right now, and we're running into issues into the future that were side effects of short-term decisions that we made in the past. And we're seeing the side effects, the ugly side effects right now. I mean, 8.5%. Is that good with everybody? Are we happy to sit here and just take that beating, or do we have to say, hey, like, I don't know exactly what the answer is, but there's an issue. There's an issue going on. And it seems like parts of the answer are this and this and this and this. And that also happens to be only what Bitcoin can provide.
Yeah, I would agree. It's
interesting then to think about that with the crypto space in general, right? To then try to muddy the waters, right? Because, you know, again, we don't want to ostracize people that are in crypto in general and maybe are playing multiple pieces of the game. That being said, there is a lot of malicious actors out there, people that are trying to take advantage, right? I mean, we all see the stuff on Twitter where it's like, send 1 Bitcoin and I'll send 2 back, and it's like, you know, hopefully, like, they're getting people. I hate to see it. I mean, if you're at the point where you're giving people Bitcoin, you probably don't deserve it.
Well, it's like it's almost equivalent to that saying, you deserve Bitcoin at the price you bought it at. So you know what? I mean, that's the thing, guys. Like, I don't have a problem with people getting scammed. I don't have a problem with people losing money, because guess what? That's how you learn. Like, I'm sorry, but that's how you learn. Like, if you don't learn the hard lessons, you ain't gonna learn.
Absolutely. Well, it's like, you know, ideally, you can tell your kid to not touch the iron, and that they listen and trust you. Of course, trust is a whole different conversation in this, right? And as far as Bitcoin and money and all this stuff goes, but yeah, I mean, ideally, you can learn those lessons. I mean, Griff and I were talking about this the other day as well. Like, Griff, whenever he first got in the space of crypto, he looked around and played all these different games, invested in all the different tokens and coins, and then eventually found Bitcoin. And it was like, oh, okay, so this is the real thing. This is what I'm moving into.
To be fair, I went Bitcoin, invest in whatever, but I always held Bitcoin first. And Bitcoin's what I heard about first. It didn't make sense to me. Like, I literally played the whole, what was it? TRX, is that one? BTT, I think. BitTorrent is one. I don't know, because I was like, they have use cases or whatever. So I went from Bitcoin to not really understanding Bitcoin to understanding, like, because the marketing is so much better for altcoins than it is for Bitcoin. I mean, just like naturally, like, until you actually find all the Bitcoin people on Twitter, it's hard to get a good, like, accurate picture of what, like, you know, Bitcoin's going after, or you just don't get enough Bitcoin content to, like, really understand why Bitcoin's best, or you have to do your homework, right? But these altcoins have great marketing. I mean, they really do. And they do have these communities where people are basically praying that the price pumps so that they can get their, like, money back, essentially. But I just wanted to clarify.
But yeah. I mean, so I was Bitcoin, saying that, you know,
I was Bitcoin first, but I deserved more Bitcoin, I think, at that time. But I didn't have a lot of money. It was at, like, what was it? Like 8,000. But it's so funny. Do you, like, think the narratives that hang with it, the narrative that at that time was like, oh, it's gonna, like, the price is gonna drop, or it's worth nothing, or whatever. I mean, it's the same things they say now at 40,000 or whatever it is at now. And I think they're going to keep saying that until it's like 500,000, maybe $1 million. Like, who really knows? Right. Because, I mean, Bitcoin's value is, like, really is infinite when you think about it, if your time frame is big enough.
Well, I kind of see it as I kind of see, like, you know, early on the narrative was, you know, oh, it's only used by criminals. Well, that's kind of fading away. Like, we've kind of proved that, you know, that's not really the case. And if a criminal is using Bitcoin, they're dumb, like, and they deserve to be caught. And so I think these narratives are just going to fade away. As soon as, like, this environmental FUD narrative, it's going to fade away. But, like, because Bitcoin is anti-fragile, you can throw crap at it and you can keep throwing crap at it, but it's still going to win. Like, and so, like, I think it's just going to be one of those things where, you know, you're going to have all these different narratives and these different, you know, like, oh, it's going to go to zero, but eventually enough people are going to realize what Bitcoin's doing and what it is, but they're just going to be like, yeah, I guess those narratives aren't really true, because I think time will prove.
I absolutely agree. Also, for those of you who do not know, and I literally learned this the other day, FUD is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's correct? Yeah. So when we talk about FUD, it's the fear, uncertainty, and doubt narratives that are being pushed. You know, Griff, you did bring up an interesting piece there, but I'm going to save it for another conversation. But the piece that you were talking about, the marketing for altcoins is definitely different, because Bitcoin does not have a centrally planned marketing team that's like, it's like that's what we're doing right here. We are the Bitcoin marketing team. Like
that's why I do like some of those toxic maxis. I mean, I don't, obviously for the compass mining reasons we were talking about. I mean, just like you said, there are Christians you don't like, evangelists, like people who really like hardcore, nothing else could explain anything type people. Right. It's like, okay, wait a second. Like if you're in Bitcoin, the whole reason you got in here is because you're supposed to be open-minded.
Right.
You can't get closed-minded on us. We're literally changing the entire financial system is changing, and you were early enough to believe it. So you should be early enough to understand there will be innovation on top of Bitcoin that you, Maxi, whoever it is, you do not like. I mean, it's just what it is. But I do feel like they play somewhat of a necessary role, because that's honestly like the toxic whatever. At one point when I got into it, probably more like a year and a half ago, it was a little bit better. Like it's a little better than where it's at right now. Like it was how I got into it. They defended it. I was like, they kind of trashed a lot of the other altcoins, and through some of the bad trashing, there were a couple good threads, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. I should not be investing in Ethereum, or I shouldn't even be dabbling in it, just because it's like, it is what it is. Like it doesn't really have a place in the industry we're creating. But just to defend them a little bit, because I like those guys. I like the Bitcoin maxis to a degree. I mean, they're just going to be mean. It is what it is. There's people, they're going to be like the old grandpas that are like shaking their stick at whatever new Bitcoin innovation is around in like 60 years or something like that, but they're around. It is what it is. They're better than the fiat defenders of the world. I mean, it's so crazy, man, how many people are defending the current financial system just because they have a big 401k. Right. I don't want to call anybody out that I know, but it's like, listen, if the only investment you've made your entire life is a 401k, you're 57 years old, and somebody's telling you about Bitcoin, it's not that they don't believe in Bitcoin, it's that they're scared of it, because they don't know what to do. They have to decide. They're having to make these big decisions, because not every company that they're invested in on that 401 has Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and not all of them are going to survive a hard money standard. It's a totally different economy than what they've lived their entire lives in. And a 401k at one point is literally our government trying to give a kickback after destroying the economy. And they said, hey, here's an easier way to invest. Please help us get our markets back up. And people bought into it. It's kind of like Social Security. I mean, a lot of it is just propaganda, but I don't know. I mean, we need some Bitcoin maxis out there to defend the world. We need some better marketing, but at the same time, maybe that's what this podcast will do. We'll get like 2 more people into Bitcoin. We'll orange a couple, and we'll just do it 1 or 2 at a time. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I don't have a problem with Bitcoiners defending Bitcoin, because it's the immune system of Bitcoin. Yeah. But just let's make sure we don't turn it into an autoimmune disease.
Seriously.
Absolutely. I think that's a great saying there. Let's not turn it into an autoimmune disease. That's brilliant. I like it a lot. Well, Matt, it has been an absolute pleasure. We thank you so much for coming on. It's always fun to hop on and have conversations with other people in the space to, give you another spot to share your information and your perspectives. Allows us to learn a little bit more and broaden our perspectives. And hopefully you people that are listening or watching right now, hopefully you guys are having fun and learning a little bit with us and broadening your perspectives. And hey, at the end of the day, Griff and I are here hanging out with Matt as well as others, and just the 2 of us. We're just hanging out, talking and sharing ideas, trying to make sense of it for ourselves. You guys got to think about this on your own. You got to put your own brains to it. What do you believe to be true in the world, and does this fit in that realm? And if it does, great. If it doesn't, well then, I don't know. We're gonna have to. You'll have to figure it out.
Doctor. It's all good.
Yeah, exactly right. You know what I'm saying? Matt said, you deserve Bitcoin at the price you bought it. So, well, Matt, it looks like, is he paused there? Is he frozen? Are you there, Matt? Can you hear us?
He's frozen.
He is frozen. Oh,
he's moving a little bit.
He's kind of moving. Can you hear us, Matt? Well, Matt, it has been absolutely great to have you on today. I'm gonna
survive this long. You know what I'm saying? We made it all the way till the end, which is really good. And just sometimes at the end it goes kaput on you because it knows the conversation was over.
I guess
Computer knows all. Computer knows all, Nick.
Well, go connect with Matt on Twitter. Let me see here. He is, you can see it there at the bottom. Connect with Matt on Twitter at Matt Moore, MATTMOORE_OK. Go connect with that guy on Twitter. You could also go to mattjmoore.com and find all of his sources there. Guy wrote a book. So go check out his info. Go to mattjmoore.com. You can find all of his information. So, Griff, that was a pretty fun one. I like that guy. That was a fun conversation to have.
He's doing a lot. He's a good, how I would say it. If you want Bitcoin Maxi, he kind of seems like he's the perfect balance.
Yep.
Glad he has a radio show. Glad he got Bitcoin at a better price than me, because it sounds like he deserves it a little bit more than I do. But what have you? Yeah, it was a great guest.
Yep.
I'm glad that you're connected with all these guys in Tulsa, man. That's awesome. I know the Sacramento Bitcoin meetup has 8 people. Hopefully I can dip my hand into that sometime soon and maybe help them out or just be a part of it. If any Sacramento Bitcoin meetup people ever listen to minute 86 of our podcast here, I'm going to let you know right now. I would like to come. I'd like to join up with you. But until then, I'll just live vicariously through you, Nick.
All righty, guys. We appreciate you listening to another episode of the Nyc and Griff Show. Come hit us on Twitter, right? Down there. Come hit us up on Twitter at Nyc and Griff Show. Nyc is spelled NYC, just like New York City, and spelled out Griff is GRIFF with 2 Fs, and show at Nyc and Griff Show on Twitter. Come talk to us, and we will see you next week. Peace.